Pack and Iron, Gunleather of the Frontier West by Richard C. Rattenbury. Anyone making Old West holsters, cartridge belts, cowboy action gear, and general gun leather probably already has this book. But for those of you who don't, this is an introduction to what, in my opinion, is the definitive reference book for anyone interested in making historically correct holsters and belts. It is a comprehensive collection of hundreds of high-quality color photographs of leatherwork and tons of historical images, holsters and belts, rifle scabbards worn by cowboys and lawmen, and even up to the Hollywood stars. Now you got your Mexican loop holsters. Money belts. That's a cool one. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. One thing this book does do is it definitively disproves the common axiom that I hear that real Old West holsters didn't have toe plugs. I made a video on how to sew toe plugs. That's kind of sealing up the bottom of the holsters. And there were some comments on there of people saying that real Old West holsters didn't have toe plugs. They're left open at the bottom so the dirt and the rain didn't accumulate in them. But if we're taking this book as a representative example, it sure seems like a lot of them were sewn shut at the bottom. There's a few of them that are left open. But it seems like in here, almost most of them are actually sewn shut. Either which, oh, that's a cool one. That's cool. Like that. Anyways, so there are several pieces in here I've always wanted to recreate. I thought it would make a good series of videos, but for the first one, where is it? Let's try. There you go. Let's try making that one. I like that. So you got the take on the Mexican loop holster, except instead of having slots cut in the back, you actually have a separate loop that's riveted and sewn to the skirt. Not a lot of tooling on it. Should be fairly easy. Basic money belt. Let's try to do that. Let's see how close I can get to it. Yeah. So the way I do this is I have an extra large sketch pad here that I will use to trace out my existing pattern. I'm just going to draw this, trace it rather. Just a point of clarification here. I'm using an existing holster pattern of mine as kind of the launching off point for this holster. The most important thing is that the holster actually fits the gun that I'm trying to put it into, and this is a pattern that I know works. There you go. Okay, so that is what I'll base the new one off of. once I get one side kind of where I want it, I'll go ahead and cut it out. And fold it. To get my other side. Tracing it. Go ahead and trace it on this side. I need to leave. I'll put a skirt up here. This one looks like it's got a pretty... Skirt is shaped completely different. It's more straight and it only comes down about halfway. Let me see. Yeah, probably shouldn't have cut it like that. That's right. It's going to take several tries here, but let's try this right now. That looks weird, but let's just see what it does. Might have gotten a little too angular right there. Cut too short. Nope. Okay. Back to our sketch pad. Let's see what doesn't work the first time. I'm going to make note of good. Okay, so that's not quite working. So what needs to be fixed? This definitely needs to be fixed. That's just not right. So let's see, I'm going to make notes here. This needs to go down. This needs to come out a little bit. You always have to be a little careful on this edge here because remember, it might not look right when it's flat like this. However, once it's filled up, it'll look more like that. So it might not be too bad. But let's try it again. one that kind of looks like it might work. I switched from paper to craft foam. I find this is a pretty good substitute for leather. Get this at pretty much any craft store. Yeah, it's a little bit thinner. You can get thicker varieties, but this is just the pack that I happen to grab. But it's a little bit more durable than the paper I'm using, and it, more importantly, it just kind of simulates leather. And it's really good for just making patterns like this, playing with it, because it's a lot cheaper to play around with this stuff, cut it up and have a pattern fail, than to use actual leather with it. So let me see here. How about red? We want to try to get this, though, as close as possible before we actually start putting marks into leather and cutting it. I don't know about you, leather's pretty expensive for me, so I have to make sure it's as close as possible before I actually I always fold it, because nothing's more frustrating than laying out a pattern and then realize that the other side isn't mirrored properly. So I always do this no matter what. And when I can, I always try to make use of my tools. The tools that I actually have to make the template. That just makes transferring it a lot easier. Adjustments on the fly here. And usually I try to focus on having smooth, kind of graceful lines. Unfortunately, I can't see the back side of the holster, so I'm having to guess here. But this is where having a gridded cutting sheet works. So what I want to do here is I'm going to keep this, if I'm wanting a straight 90-degree angle, I just line it up with my marks here, and one of my marks up here. Let's see. It's getting pretty close. Completely disorganized. Okay. And that. Let's get lining up with my lines here. Okay, we've got that loop. Looks like it dives down just a little bit. It's mostly straight across. Dives down a little bit there. It's probably about the same width as the cylinder there. When you can, it's good to always kind of go off references. Let me see. What I mean is, it's always tricky doing this with photographs because you have parallax. You've got just the image itself is, you can't really make direct comparisons off of, but you can kind of guesstimate. So that loop is about as wide, a little touch wider than a cylinder here. Which is what? Here. It goes down a little bit. So it's just going to make an arc. This will be cut long, I'm sure. So the camera can see it. So we'll have something that looks about like that. So we're going to transfer our foam pattern onto cardstock. Cardstock is just better for tracing. Alright, I think I have a pattern ready to try. After a lot of scrap, trial and error, I think we'll try to transfer this onto an actual piece of leather. Okay, so I've gotten this far, and ultimately you can't tell how a pattern is going to truly behave until you actually get it cut and sewn and put into leather. There are a couple issues I'm noticing. I think the throat looks good, but I think I'm a little too tight down here. You can see the sight is poking through here, the ejector rod. It feels a little tight. I just need to give myself a little bit more room right here. Additionally, when I pull my skirt over, I'm going to need a little bit more real estate down here to get that attached. So, all right. So what I'm going to do, so what does that mean here? That means I need to so what that means is I need to go back to my pattern here, and I need, let's see, so I need to come out a little bit here. Obviously that'll fit both sides. And I need to come out a little more here. Just take this and shift it over about maybe 1/8 of an inch. Because remember, you're going to be doubling it. So if you do an 1/8 inch over here, it also adds an 1/8 inch over here. That gives you a 1/4 of an inch, which should be about right. But the trick is to do it evenly. I'm watching those center lines. Okay. Do a darker trace here. There you go, and then I will just complete. It's just a matter of connecting those. Alright, and up here, what I'm going to do, I don't think it needs any more room this way. I'm going to take it, I'm going to just take this and pivot it out. That way, bring it back to center, pivot out about the same amount this way. Something like that. Alright, and then I'll cut this out, fold it over, trace it out, and that will give me a revised pattern. Okay, so here's the new pattern. I think I got it right where I want it to be on this 4 3/4 barrel gun. You see it, the barrel is going to end right up here. You have a longer barrel. Going to keep going down. So now I just need to attach the loop. And in the book, it is both riveted and stitched on either side. So my plan is I'm going to rivet on one side, stitch it, and then once that's in place, then I'll loop it around here and do it on the other side. And something tells me I'm going to regret having went ahead and put the stamp in the center there, because getting that exactly in the center is going to be maybe difficult. We'll see. where I want it. For me personally, about that much showing, just a little bit of the tip showing above the leather. That's the for me, that's how I prefer along the rivet there. Set that. There you go. And again, I want it to be sewn as well, so. Okay, so get that. Flip it around. It's going to be sewn. There. But looking back on it now, I probably wouldn't have put my stamp on there until after I figure out this pattern. But anyway. Alright, so now I just need to stitch it. Okay, so I just traced out this kind of oblong shape here, and I'm going to hopefully not screw this up. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this before I make the holes for the other side of that. Again, I'm using my lines here on my cutting mat to line everything up. Alright, and then it's just a matter of sewing that up. Alright, moment of truth. I'm just going to squirt this down here with as much flexibility as I can over. And I'm gonna I want that loop to conform. So here's what I'm going to do here. So on this side, got a little too much on this side, but I've got a good margin here, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep trimming it off a little bit at a time. I've got lots of sanding blocks that I use to do final shaping, clean up edges on. And what I'm doing here is also why I did not bring those those lines down onto the skirt, because I presumed that I was going to need to do some final fitting on this. Gone ahead and made my marks here on my pattern, and I'm going to note the removal on this edge of the skirt. So next time I'll know to cut that off, cut that a little shorter. Always be careful when you're doing what I'm doing next to threads, because it's very easy for that capillary action to wick that dye up into the threads, and then suddenly you'll have black threads. Stamp could be a little bit more centered, but I'll know that next time. Okay, so there's that. Now on to the money belt. Now the money belt looks like a pretty standard pattern belt, so I'm hoping that should go fairly easy.
Since this is 3 to 4 ounce leather, I'm adding some backing material to help support the cartridge loops. So the money belt's done. You can see that's your, essentially what you've got is a long leather tube that you can store stuff in and lock it in place by feeding it through this slot here. Now, the picture in the book doesn't show it, but normally I would put on a keeper. That would be an extra loop of leather that goes up and around that holds the belt and keeps it from kind of shifting like that. But the rig in the book doesn't have that, so I'll leave that off. So let me see if I can get this set up now.